Yo, how's it going everybody? It's the Masked Man, and today we're going to be talking about the greatest mangaka of all time. Now, yesterday I took the time to ask many different people, YouTubers, non-YouTubers, homies, acquaintances, and basically the whole bunch, who would your top 3 mangaka of all time be? And the most common answers were Oda, Miura, Takehiko Inoue, and the person I want to concentrate on this video and my pick for the greatest mangaka of all time, Naoki Urasawa. Now, the argument could be made for all of these people. When it comes to Oda and Miura, however, for me it's a little difficult to pick them because they just have one work. When it's all said and done, One Piece will end up as the greatest shonen of all time, although I would probably still have Slam Dunk above it. And when it's all said and done, Berserk will go down as the greatest manga of all time, but that's nor here nor there. We are talking about Urasawa, and this video is not scripted, so I'm gonna kind of be all over the place. But when it comes to Urasawa, I think he has the greatest argument due to the consistency and the time period in which he has been able to release a lot of these phenomenal works. You can't really blame him for not releasing his things, and you also can't blame him for having poor artwork or poor quality, as especially in Billy Bat, he's been able to demonstrate his amazing ability with some of the panels, Billy Bat actually being one of his most recent works. Only him and Takehiko Inoue have multiple mangas that are within my top 20 and even within my top 10. And in my eyes, that's where the real debate lies, whether you pick Takehiko Inoue or Naoki Urasawa, because really, I mean, at number 2 I have Vagabond, at number 6 I have Real, and at number 10 I have Slam Dunk. And when it comes to Urasawa, at number 4 I have Monster, at number 5 I have Pluto, at number 8 I have 20th Century Boys, and at number 17 I have Billy Bat. The only gripe I really have with Inoue, and I think what's holding him back from being my number 1 mangaka definitively, is whilst although I do think Vagabond, despite it not being completed, is good enough to be at my number 2, it has pretty much been cancelled for over 5 years now. You can't blame Urasawa for not finishing any of the works that are on that list. But now that I've kind of dealt with all of the external things, some of the other mangakas that are definitely in contention, here I want to give some of my reasonings as to why I think Naoki is the greatest mangaka of all time. And one of them is, again, the releases that he has had. If you look over the span of which he's been able to release his mangas, his greatest work, Monster, was released between 1994 and 2001. 20th Century Boys was released between 1999 and 2006, Pluto was released between 2003 to 2009, and Billy Bat was from 2008 all the way to 2016. Now, I didn't realize this until I read the list, but at the same time he was finishing up Monster, he was already working on 20th Century Boys, and whilst working on 20th Century Boys, he was already working on Pluto, and whilst working on Pluto, he had already started Billy Bat. This man has been releasing consecutive classic after classic after classic, with Monster being his peak work and in contention for one of the greatest mangas of all time. But alas, I've already kind of prefaced that point that he's been able to release multiple works of extremely high quality, but now I want to get into some of the reasonings as to what makes those works high quality, and I think the first thing that needs to be addressed and get out of the way is the antagonists that he's able to come up with. When you have multiple different stories and each of those stories is able to bring about one of the greatest antagonists we've ever seen in anime and manga, you're doing something right. I mean, we're talking Friend from 20th Century Boys, and Friend from 20th Century Boys is by far one of the best antagonists in manga. He's one that definitely feels more like an entity than a personality, but that's kind of what plays into the overall mystery of 20th Century Boys, and mystery is something I want to get into later. But I think the big bad that I am definitely talking about, and that you guys know I'm talking about, is Johan from Monster. Johan, again, I mean, when I talk about Friend, I'm talking about one of the best. When it comes to the best, for me, it's either Griffith or Johan, and I definitely give the nod to Johan. Also, shouts out to Pluto, by the way. But part of the reason why I wanted to bring up the antagonist first is because the antagonists, more often than not, really do lie into what makes Urasawa's work so special, and that's the thriller mystery aspect of all of his stories. When it comes to Monster, the main mystery is really, why is Johan the way he is? We know from the very beginning of Monster that Johan is our antagonist, but as to essentially what's wrong with Johan and what's his backstory is truly the intriguing mystery throughout the majority of Monster. When it comes to Billy Bat, we're trying to find out the origin of the bat and what it all means. When it comes to Pluto, we're trying to find out who exactly is Pluto and why is Pluto doing this. And when it comes to 20th Century Boys, we're trying to figure out who is Friend and why is Friend so obsessed with world domination. All of the mysteries, all of the intrigues, all of the thematic importances within his mangas are all pretty much portrayed through the antagonist. When it comes to starting off a story and through the expositional stage creating the setting without giving up too much and essentially creating the overall mystery that will captivate the audience, no one does it better than Urasawa. And crazy enough, this ties into the first point I had of multiple works, is we've been able to see Urasawa execute this flawlessly with different stories, with different settings, and different amount of time spans. I mean, you look at Pluto, Pluto's only 60 chapters, but it is 60 chapters of absolute brilliance. When you look at a story like Monster, it's 160. When you look at 20th Century Boys, if I remember correctly, 20th Century Boys was over 200 chapters. And so you're able to see Urasawa be able to hold mysteries and captivate the audience for different amounts of time with completely different characters and completely different themes. And it's really quite interesting to see Urasawa grow and develop even as a writer throughout the times, as I think Billy Bat, his most recent work, is definitely the most confusing of all of the mysteries. And by confusing, I mean borderline JoJo's Part 8 level confusing at first, because you have no idea what's going on. But once you piece everything together, the absolute satisfaction, it's pretty much uncomparable to anything else. And not only the antagonists, as I brought up earlier, but the protagonists, they all serve their role greatly. And despite, of course, the bad guys being the more, I'd say, intriguing aspect of the story, which you could argue is almost the case with any other manga, I think, again, the protagonists serve their role to the greatest to their extent, making the final confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist some of the most climactic and memorable moments in all of manga history. Reference Johan and Dr. Tenma. Also, the side characters of Urasawa, I think, is going to go as an extremely underrated aspect, because those side characters in some of the works, especially Monster, 20th Century Boys, the Monster and 20th Century Boys specifically, have the best, like, some of the best side characters I've ever witnessed, all serving their role to the greatest of their potential, as well as bringing something to the story. And this is the true brilliance of Naoki Urasawa. Now that I've already brought up the protagonist, the antagonist, and the side characters, and that's everything connects within an Urasawa manga. I think Monster is the greatest example, as every person that we meet in Monster is affected by Johan. Everyone that we meet in 20th Century Boys has had some sort of connection to the protagonist or the antagonist. When it comes to Pluto, every character in Pluto contributes and brings something, and when it comes to Billy Bat, the mysteries of how this person connects with another person in history due to this bat is all just absolutely brilliant and insane. So at times, the overall structure and building of the cast that Urasawa was able to have within his mangas is almost unmatched. Being able to produce one of the greatest antagonists, or some of the greatest antagonists of all time, whilst also having phenomenal protagonists and phenomenal side characters with their own stories that all connect to the bigger picture story, whilst also keeping the main mystery a thing till pretty much the end. Like, you know how everyone praises Araki for what he's been able to do in Part 7 and Part 8, and maybe the JoJo fans will get on me because of this, but I believe this with a conviction. All 4 of the works that I've listed in this video is like Part 8 and Part 7 tier. You know how everyone praises Part 8 for its mystery and its intrigue? Urasawa has been able to produce 4 mangas that, in my estimate, are better than JoJo's Part 8 back to back to back to back. I think one of the only criticisms you can have to Urasawa, and it's one that I think is a pretty one depending on which one you talk about, and that's the endings of his mangas. Personally, I'm fine with Billy Bat's. If you've noticed, I haven't wanted to get too much into Billy Bat because I want to do the individual review, which I haven't gone around to because I've just been doing all sorts of things. And Pluto actually had a really solid ending. I think Pluto's ending was great. 20th Century Boys did have a 16-chapter extension, around 16 chapters if I'm correct, that pretty much cleaned up the ending of that manga, but I'm totally fine with 20th Century Boys ending. But I think the main one is Monster. A lot of people have an issue with Monster's ending, but I think part of that is due to a bad analysis of Johan's character, and there is a great video explaining Monster's ending that I will leave in the link in the description below. So if you are someone who did not like Monster's ending, I'd really suggest you watch that video because it helped me a lot as well after reading Monster. If I'm being 100% transparent, this is really just a video for me telling you, hey, if you haven't read anything written by Naoki Urasawa, you need to hop on this train immediately. So I kind of presented my overall case and reasonings as to why I think Naoki Urasawa is the greatest mangaka of all time. But if you are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, that way you're notified whenever a new video pops up on some of your favorite anime, manga, or whatever content. As always, this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.